So they take this demonic technology and they use it to create a twisted version of a religion in which we're in control of the kingdom of God, because obviously we're God, and we want to use technology, as Kevin Kelly says, to break free of the imperative of matter. So this is not just let's make some stuff to make our lives easier, right? This is a whole project. This is the ultimate end point of progress, is it breaks out of time and energy and it makes us immortal, it makes us gods. That's what we're doing. Which, by the way, is Satan's offer in the Garden of Eden. Why don't you be gods instead? So I was thinking about science, and the modern scientific worldview is totally tied up with control. And there's a story that scientists often tell that we're just all about understanding things, and the consequences of our actions have nothing to do with us because that's just all the technology. So that allows somebody who's worked out how to split the atom to pretend they're not responsible for a nuclear bomb when they know they damn well are. Science, the etymology of the word science is interesting because it has the same origin as the words sickle and scythe and schism and sex. Actually, they're all about dividing, right? They're all about division. So what science does is it chops up the world into little pieces and then looks at it supposedly objectively so we can understand how things work. And it's always tied up with a desire to control, because as soon as you do that, then you can create a technology to allow you to do something with that scientific discovery. And particularly now, when science is pretty much entirely sponsored by the corporate world, the notion that there's just a kind of disinterested objective science where people are just trying to find out how things work for the benefit of humanity is not true. Science is about understanding the world in a very particular narrow way, understanding how the elements of the world work so that we can manage them. That's what it's about. Religion is also a way of understanding the world, but at the heart of a religious worldview is that there's always a mystery. So, for example, in the Christian tradition, you can't look on the face of God without dying, right? Because it's just too powerful. You can't see it. Nobody ever sees God. In Islam, you're not even allowed to portray God because it's not a thing you can talk about. Almost all religions will say there are things we can know and there are things we can't. And that's the traditional worldview of humanity. And it's okay to not know things. In fact, it's necessary to not know things because there are some things we shouldn't know, not in this life anyway. We can't ever know the essence of God, for example. We can't ever know really the meaning of the universe. We don't, that's okay. There are limits to what our knowledge should be as well. But again, in the modern worldview, because there are no limits, there are also no limits to knowledge. So we should be able to cut up absolutely every aspect of reality and examine it and then use it to our own benefits. And if that means that we then start going, oh, look, we've worked out how the genetic code works. Let's see if we can fiddle with it to make ourselves a better animal. Let's see if we can create an artificial intelligence. Let's see if we can create a weapon so powerful that it can destroy entire nations. That's the consequence of that scientific method. It's not neutral science. It's not neutral. It's a control mechanism. And it's one very particular, very modern way of seeing. And it's true that humans are always curious. We like to travel. We go places. We invent new technologies. We do stuff like that. But the immense power of modern science, when you take that inquiring mind out of the picture of the world itself, you separate it from this notion that the world is a sacred place. If you have done this thing that we have done of desacralizing everything and saying the world is just a bunch of material matter, and then you apply science to it, then you've got something which ends up being pretty infernal, actually. But it also ends up being logical, because if you don't believe there's anything divine or sacred or true or are there any laws at all other than the laws of physics, then why not cut the world up and make it into a better shape? Because it all just happened by accident anyway. So why not try and control and manage it? And that's what science ends up doing. So, but it's, again, I think it's the way of seeing at the heart of modern science is deeply corrupted. And you can't separate it from the consequences of what happens when a scientist... I think Wendell Berry once said that the day is gone, if it ever existed, when a scientist could simply uncover knowledge, release it into the world, and assume that he'd done good. Which I think is just, that's exactly where we are. So it's that way of seeing, again, that's the problem. René Guénon, the French philosopher, who I've written about a bit recently, he said we were living in what he called the reign of quantity, which is another good way of putting it. Quantity is all, like you say, so you can mass produce tomatoes and everyone in the world gets a tomato, hooray, but they don't taste like tomatoes and they're produced in hideous circumstances, and the consequences of that are just flow into all areas of life. but you do get a lot of tomatoes, right? So it's the reign of materialism, reign of quantity. Again, everything comes down from transcendence into immanence, and so you have a system which is incredibly good at producing tons of stuff. It's not very good at distributing it because there's still loads of starving people, and it offsets all of its production so that the poison goes into the oceans and all the rest of it. But nevertheless, the industrial system is really good at providing a load of things if you've got the money to pay for them, right? That's the reign of quantity. And so you can look at that and go, wow, look at all this stuff we have that our parents never had, which is true, right? We've got a load of stuff that our parents never had. But what are the consequences? What are the spiritual, the cultural, the ecological consequences of that? Are they worth the exchange? What's the spiritual reckoning? That's the question. So the spiritual reckoning might be that you can eat a tomato every day, but you don't know what a real tomato tastes like. Right? That's actually quite a big deal. It sounds like a trivial thing, but it's not a trivial thing, because how many kids growing up in cities in the West today have no idea where food comes from? Pretty much all of them. Right? They've got no idea. They don't know what a cow is. They don't know what grows in any of the hedges. Of course they don't. How would they? Because they've never seen it. They think food comes in a plastic box from a supermarket. There are no local shops left either, so it's not as if they can pop round the corner and do something alternative. That's for middle class people now, right? If you want to buy like just a normally raised cow, you've got to be wealthy and find some sort of middle class deli to go and get it in. It's exactly that. It's the reign of quantity. So there are huge consequences to producing in this way, but it becomes so normalized that it's almost like you don't know it until you actually do eat a normal tomato. You don't realize that you're eating crap all day, and then you think, wow, look at the taste of this tomato that I've just grown in my polytunnel is incredible compared to this thing I got from Tesco. But it's almost like that's often a moment of revelation for people as well when they taste real food. I mean, it definitely happened to me when I was younger, when I realized what real food tasted like compared to the stuff I was buying. So you have a reign of quantity, but the quality's gone. The spiritual essence is gone. The culture's gone that surrounds it. But you've got a load of stuff. You've got a load of stuff, and that's represented as progress again. But we tot up the stuff, but we don't tot up the consequences of producing the stuff. We add together what we've gained. We never add together what we've lost as a result of that. Yeah, there's something about the relationship between people and place that's vital. A lot of what we lose in modernity in the machine society is really relationships. So it might be our relationship to nature, our relationship to community, our relationship to local place, our relationship to the food we eat. Like you say, I mean, I went fishing with my son. I go fishing with my son a lot, and mostly don't catch things, but we went sea fishing last year, caught a load of mackerel, cooked it on the beach. It's just simple stuff, but it tasted incredible. Yeah, much better than most of the stuff you'd buy from the shop. And that was because of the relationship we'd had with each other and going fishing and catching the mackerel and then cooking it and gutting it and showing him how to do that. That whole relationship is part of the process, and it's almost like the consuming of the fish is just the last part of that process, whereas going to the shop and buying fish in plastic and cooking it in the oven when you have no idea where it came from is a different relationship. And I think those relationships actually inform your life in a way that we are maybe not aware of now, because a lot of them have been broken. And the relationship with your place, that kind of indigeneity, that rootedness in your place, is such a vital part of the human experience. And again, it's something that we have lost or chucked out, because the story of progress and the story of individualism tell us that anyone can go anywhere. We're all just individuals. We can shift around the world. We can follow the money. We can go where the work is. We can move from country to country. We can move from town to town within the country. We can move from house to house. We don't really need that relationship. We don't have to think about it, because the system is such that we can live the same everywhere. Wherever you live, you can have your smartphone with you. You can drive to the shops, so it doesn't really matter where you are. Hopefully you'll live in a nice place rather than a horrible one, but fundamentally there's no sense of rootedness in place. And I think it's another one of these great failures of our way of seeing, that we've failed to understand that, again, having a relationship through time with, say, your community or your ancestors is similar to having a relationship to a piece of land, which most of us don't do. I mean, I don't come from where I live. It's difficult to do that now, but actually the breaking of the relationship between people and place is really significant, because it's another one of those things that makes us feel like rootless individuals. We don't particularly come from a place. We don't belong to a place. We don't stay in a place. We just happen to be somewhere for a bit. Probably somewhere we didn't even come from. So there's no sense of, my my grandmother lived in this house and I live here too, and it's kind of going to be passed to my children. That's a very rare thing now in the modern world, in a way that it didn't used to be here in Ireland even a couple of generations ago. And even now, a lot of people around here have lived here for a long time, and their ancestors have lived here for a long time. But that's breaking down quite quickly, because the whole economy is based on people just being units of labour and going wherever the work happens to be. And all of that is a breaking of relationships. So again, the reign of quantity, you can go anywhere and go to the same shop and buy the same stuff, but your intimate relationship with the distinctive place and the people that's in it, and the limits that imposes on you, right? Because if you're in a place, you're going to be more limited in probably what you can buy and what you can experience than if you were flying around the world just looking at things every 5 minutes. But the relationships you have will be much deeper. So in the reign of quantity, we can have a load of stuff but no relationships, basically. And we make up for that by going on social media and pretending we've got relationships with strangers on the screen, which we haven't. And then we just go mad and start screaming at each other. But it's all I think fundamentally broken relationships between people and each other, people and their ancestors, people and nature and place. And we break the relationships, we replace them with stuff, and then we wonder why we're not happy. Like I said, Lewis Mumford talked of a machine made of human parts. And the fuel of the machine back in the day was slaves, right? So pretty much every society until a few hundred years ago had slaves, and still lots of them do. So if you're going to build a sophisticated system, you need a ton of muscle power. And so you just make people do it, basically. You take the weakest people in society and force them to work for you. We don't do that so much anymore in the modern world because we don't need slaves. It's because we have fossil fuels instead. So we mine the earth. We don't need the human muscle. We've got, we've got the burning of the coal and the oil and the gas to do it for us. So we do mine everything. We mine the soil for industrial agriculture. We literally mine the earth. We take out the coal. We take out the oil. We take out the gas. We dig out the rare earth metals so that we can put them in our smartphones, so that we can all tweet about how we're very environmentally responsible and we don't like climate change. By the way, the internet causes as much, pretty much the same quantity of greenhouse gases to be emitted as the whole of the aviation industry, interestingly. So I find it interesting that people campaign against flying on their smartphones rather than just throwing their phones away. You could do both, but it's fundamentally, we're pulling out the blood of the earth all the time. We're mining the natural world in order to get these concentrated resources so that we can break ourselves free of nature. The way to see it maybe is to think that what we're trying to do is to break out of the laws of matter and energy. We're trying to use technology to free us from nature, fundamentally, which will also free us from death. So rather than having a sense that we have to live within the God-given limits of the earth, and that there's something more than us anyway, we say, well, there isn't anything more than us, and I don't have to live within the limits of anything. I can actually use technology to rip out the very essence of nature, burn it, concentrate it, and use that power to try and break free of the laws of nature. It's fundamentally what we do. There's a very interesting book called What Technology Wants by a guy called Kevin Kelly, which I wrote an essay about once. And he's a great Silicon Valley thought leader, Kevin Kelly, and he has this great mystical notion that there's a thing called the technium, which is the kind of the whole collective of technology which is developing under its own steam and is going to be an independent organism that we're helping to create. And he's very open about this in his book. He says that the aim of technology is to break free of matter and energy and time so that we can conquer everything, so that we can live outside time. So in other words, he's using technology to try and get back to the state we were in the Garden of Eden, where we were outside time and matter, right? So it's a religious worldview. And if you break into the heart of the whole technical system and you look at the way these guys in Silicon Valley, like Kevin Kelly or Ray Kurzweil or even Zuckerberg and these guys think, it's pretty much a religious worldview, right? Obviously, they don't necessarily believe in an actual God, but they want to be gods, and they want to use technology to transcend. And the metaverse and the kind of thing that they want to upload their minds into is the equivalent of the kind of the kingdom of God where you can live in eternity. It's just that we're going to create it ourselves with technology rather than believing that it might exist somewhere else. So they take this, demonic technology and they use it to create a twisted version of a religion in which we're in control of the kingdom of God because obviously we're God. And we want to use technology as Kevin Kelly says, to break free of the imperative of matter. So this is not just let's make some stuff to make our lives easier, right? This is a whole project. This is the ultimate end point of progress, is it breaks out of time and energy and it makes us immortal. It makes us gods. That's what we're doing. Which, by the way, is Satan's offer in the Garden of Eden. Why don't you be gods instead? So just food for thought there. But that's fundamentally what we're doing. And it's a big project that most people don't think about in those terms. But the guys running it do. They talk about it very openly. So that is worth meditating on.